Hi everyone, Hal Crosman here with Screenwriting U. Now, if you haven't read Sandy's scene, you should go read it because I'm not going to go over every detail. I'm just going to point out what she did in this video having to do with character traits and subtext. So to start with, let's look at the character traits. Nancy, confrontational, stubborn, scheming, caring. Squire, evasive, selfish, happy-go-lucky, and seductive. So let's see how we did. Um, let's see. So we start with this part right here. Nancy's pointing her hand at the monitor. The numbers are slowly dropping. The bald man is throwing up his arms up and freaking out basically. So here Nancy is scheming, right? She's using one of her traits. Then we go right to Squire. Good, you've got him perspiring. You know, it's like, and then Nancy, back off, will you? I don't want this to be obvious. So here she's being confrontational. Let's move on down. Squire immediately, hey, I didn't do anything. He's being evasive. So these, right now, everything here is fitting her traits. Nancy says, now top that one, rookie. You could say she's being confrontational. I think what Sandy was going for was that we actually had her subtext, which was she's covertly competitive, but this is actually kind of overt. So I'll come back to it in just a little bit. Squire then goes into this whole thing where he's seducing this woman. Now, even though he's not really there, right? He's seducing her, and so he's being seductive, and then it switches. Suddenly she opens her eyes and she finds she's lip locked with this sweaty bald guy, and I think that's kind of the happy-go-lucky thing. As in, Squire's playing with this. He seems to be having a lot of fun. Then Nancy's expression is sad, so here she shows that she's caring. So what I'm seeing, is that we've got a lot of good examples here of the characters actually demonstrating and giving their traits in dialogue. Let's keep going. Below that, Nancy says, that wasn't nice. She didn't deserve that. Again, she's being caring. Squire has his whole thing, and he says, besides, I enjoyed that, didn't you? Now, I'm going to say that's him being selfish, and which fits his traits. Nancy, again, glares back at Squire, so she's being confrontational. Stop, stop. She's again being confrontational. Now, Squire down here, he says, after causing the decline in the guy's stock, and then having the guy clutch his chest and fall to the ground, Squire says, "All right, you win. I can't top that." Now, here's the thing on that. That's subtext. Squire actually was the one who just did this. I mean, he caused it to go lower, and now he's pretending it's her. You win. I can't stop that. What I hate to say is that actual subtext fits Nancy's much better. It's being covertly competitive. Just something to think about. Let's go down a little further. So, again, Squire busted whenever the angel appears. You could call that happy-go-lucky. It's like, again, he's still playing with this whole thing. So, Squire down here, it wasn't me. The angel has appeared. Squire, it wasn't me. Whatever you're here about. So, again, he's being evasive. Gabriella, the angel, now goes into this whole thing about all the stuff they've done, and she finishes down here with, I'd say that takes you both one step closer to hell. So, they're in kind of a bad spot. Squire moves close to Gabriella, takes her hand with his. So this is him, again, being seductive, which is one of his traits. And at the same time, he goes through this whole little, I'm just a poor, formerly lost soul, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to say this is happy-go-lucky. He's still playing with this situation. Nancy goes immediately confrontational. So, what are you, God's gift to women? You aren't half as good as you think you are. Now, here's what I'm going to say on this. You're going to see as we go through this. Confrontational is a trait that shows up more than any trait for Nancy. And I'm going to suggest if you have a situation like that, that you take a look at the other traits and see if there's something else that you want to present. Squire responds. Now, up here, Squire said, Gabby, Gabby, Gabby. And then he says, Nancy, Nancy, Nancy. And then we have Gabriella saying, children, children, children. Even though this is nice cadence, it's like, I'd say that repeating the thing, the person's name or whatever, I think that's more of a Squire trait. And that would fit his dialogue much more. So I think there's something lost here by doing this. Just a thought. Let's go a little further down. So now we go through, the whole thing where they're kind of establishing, who Jane Jones is, and that she's very average, but she's got the hots for Jeffrey. Gabriella says your job is to get these two together. Squire, so that's it. Nancy, we accomplished something good and we got a second chance. Gabriella then says, absolutely. And then adds this little last minute threat, singing Purgatory, here we come, right back where we started from. And then she's gone. Okay, so now again, Nancy goes back to being confrontational. Look what you got us into. I knew I should have steered clear of you. So it's like, and then Squire, Nancy, Nancy, Nancy. The here and now is much more important than the past. And in that case, once again, he is being evasive, which fits him. So Nancy, we need a plan. Make her more attractive, more interesting, witty. I've got to help her. Now, even though Nancy's in kind of a bad situation, this still fits the caring trait. So that's the kind of stuff we're working towards. You even when you've got the character in a different kind of situation, it's still they're going to be talking out of their traits. Now let's take it to the next step. So then Nancy bites her nails, straightens up. Got it. Let down the hair, ensnare the man. So she tells us what she's going to do, and then we see her do it. This is one of those places again where I think we would have been better off if she just said, "Oh, I've got it," and then we see her doing it. Anyway, let's see. Squire, let the master do his work. Nancy, that's what got you in trouble, isn't it, Mr. Smooth Guy? Mess with some angry guy's wife. So this is one of those things where I don't even know if this is needed. I don't know if it provides any kind of value whatsoever. Again, it's her being confrontational. We've already seen lots and lots of that. So sometimes, whenever especially when you do a trait over and over and over, when it's absolutely not necessary, when there's other things you can do, I recommend you kind of go into those other things. Let's see. So now it is Squire's turn. And again, we got Nancy, by the way, being confrontational. Let's see. How did that turn out last time, idiot? That's actually kind of funny. So Jane watches as Jeffrey studies the monitor. Squire approaches Jane and begins to breathe on her neck. So once again, now here he's being seductive and he's being kind of happy-go-lucky, having fun here. Jane's looking flush. She fans herself and unbuttons her sweater, so he's starting to succeed. Squire winks at Nancy again. He's playing. He's being seductive. He pushes Jane towards Jeffrey. She takes a few steps closer to Jeffrey. She breathes hard. Okay. Now, slowly she reaches out to tap him on the shoulder, then turns, runs, and vomits. And I think anytime you can have a vomit scene in a movie, that's a great thing. So, anyway, Squire, hey, it's just a setback. Once again, a little bit evasive. Gabrielle appears, the stopwatch. So this is kind of nice to know that we're counting down. Nancy, there has to be a way. We can help her. Now, I'm going to say this is stubborn. It's like no matter what the situation is, Nancy is not going to give up. Now we're counting down even more. Um, so, and this right here, Squire saying, afraid of going back to the old big P as in purgatory. I mean, depending upon how he says it, this could actually be him kind of charming to control Nancy so that hopefully she'll solve it. Anyway, Nancy, no, that's not it. That's not it at all. She's me, the way I used to be. So, in a way, that's a little bit caring. And then finally, we've got a bit of scheming on Nancy's part down here, where she trips Jeffrey in order to get Jane to make this offer. Now, let me just say this. Looking through that, I would say Sandy did a great job of including these characters' traits in their dialogue and putting it in their action. This is actually excellent. There are, as I've already said, there's a few things I would point out, but I'm going to take it one step further. We're going to talk about subtext because I think that's where the most improvement can be made here. But on traits, what I would do on this kind of thing is I would go through and I would take a look and say, where are things like this where a trait didn't show up, and then and stand back and say which trait could show up in the midst of this dialogue. And there's like 3 or 4 places in here that there's dialogue with that doesn't have any traits. So that's one way to improve this scene from a dialogue perspective. The second is on subtext. All right, let's go up here. We're going to take a look at subtext. Oh, by the way, there were a couple of things that I noticed in here when I looked back over it. One of them was right here, Squire. He says, let's just back up a bit. Now he's talking to Gabriella the angel. I'm just a poor, formerly lost soul who's new at this whole heavenly angel gig. Now remember, who he's standing there with is Nancy, who is not a brand new heavenly angel. So basically, Squire is being selfish in this situation. His selfish trait is showing through. There was one more time here, right here. When Gabriella first arrives, Squire says, "It wasn't me, whatever you're here about." Again, being selfish. So just wanted to point that out because that was another place that Sandy did a very good job. Now let's talk for a second about subtext. We've got this line right here. Nancy says, "Now top that one, rookie." So this is a line that's confrontational, but I think it's one of those places that there could be subtext. There's probably 3 or 4 places in here that we could have even more subtext. And Sandy actually did a good job. There's a couple places that their subtext clearly shows through. But let's just take this one for a second. If we look at Nancy's subtext, Nancy is a scheming lady who is covertly competitive with her peers. And the reason I went to this one is because this is a place where Nancy is being overtly competitive. So you take a line like this and and you just start saying, okay, how could she kind of communicate the same thing in a less overt way? And I'm sure there's lots and lots of things that you could have her say. You could have her say something like, since she just completed this essentially magic trick, or something like that, she could say something like, "It must be sad to watch a master." So in that case, she's implying that. She's saying overtly she's a master, but if it's sad for him to watch her, that implies that he could never come up to her level. She could say something like, she could, since Squire is all about looking good, she could look at him and say, "You know what? You actually look really good," and then ... and then put it in an insult. You actually look really good ... when you're beat. Or, when you've lost all hope, or, something like that. Another possibility is for her to just declare her own success. Something like, she says, "A star is born, ... and her name isn't Squire," or "A star is born and it isn't you," or, something like that. So So it's the same kind of thing, but because it's done in a subtextual way, it's going to be more interesting dialogue. It also points to what it's saying instead of being, more overt. So it also fits her subtext by having her being covertly competitive. So, um, let's go down. There was another one here. Yeah, and this is another time, where she's being very overt and where she's also being confrontational. So, you know, Squire has taken the hand of Gabriella and he's pleading his case, but he's also doing it in kind of a seductive way. So Nancy forcefully pulls Squire's arm away from Gabriella and gets in his face. And she says, "So what are you, God's gift to women? You aren't half as good as you think you are." Now, so you take a look at this and you say, what's the essence? What's the meaning on it? What she's saying, and then start to look for ways to communicate the same thing, in a more indirect way or through her being covertly competitive or something like that. So, since he's talking about sex anyway, or she's talking about sex here, God's gift to women, she could say something like, Squire, there's no sex in hell. Maybe you might want to try just a little bit harder or something like that, right? So it's like, so she's challenging him and she's being, again, covertly competitive. So she's challenging him in kind of a covert way. Another possibility would be to say something like, and let's see. So this again, guys versus girls. She could say, what would you do instead of all this stuff? She says, what would you do if God was here? Try to seduce her too? So again, it makes light of the fact that he's trying to seduce, and it also, says God's a woman, which of course probably wouldn't fit really well with Squire. You never know. And then another possibility would be she's just basically saying, what you just did was stupid. So she could say something like, "Do you want to spend eternity trying lines like that on Satan?" Again implying that it wouldn't work. So here's what I'm suggesting: that when you get done with something like this and you've completed the whole thing, you go back through and you look for what are the lines, again, like these, that you believe either need something more? What are the traits that aren't showing up, right? It's like all I did was I looked and I said, you know what? I'm not seeing Nancy's covert competitive trait. I'm seeing her being very overtly competitive. So where can I put that in? And I went and found two places to put that in, right? You may also go back and look and say, you know what? I'm not seeing her scheming enough, or I'm not seeing her being confrontational, or not confrontational, stubborn enough, or like, I'm not seeing Squire being whatever, right? And by the way, I think she did a very good job on Squire. I think he actually used all these traits. I think with Nancy, stubborn only showed up one time, but everything else showed up very, very well. The only place that I had a concern was about this, about the subtext. So, having said all of that, what I'm saying is you go back, you take a look at the traits, you take a look at the subtext, and then you go through and you look for where are the places that you can put that in, or you can make a change in how the dialogue is written and turn it into something. In the next video, we'll be working with interest techniques.